being recorded, so if you do have any objections, please disconnect. With that, I'd like to go ahead and turn the call over to our Vice President of Servicing Performance Management, Don Griffin. Don, take it away.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. Welcome to this week's call, the Servicer Information Session on COVID-19. We've had a great deal of success with these calls and sharing information and answering your questions, and we hope to continue that today. We're going to have a brief recap of some of the policies and bulletins that have come out from Servicing Policy, along with an EDR demonstration, if you will, and some review of some of the available resources on COVID-19, and then we'll get back into our Q&A, a few carryovers from last week, and we'll open up the lines for new questions and answers. So without further delay, I'll turn it over to Ryan McGinnis from our Servicing Policy Group.
Thank you, Don, and thanks everybody for joining us today. So we will be going through, just at a high level, an overview of the 3 COVID-19 bulletins that we've put out, and go through some of the details, especially of the more recent bulletin, and then also take a look at some of our reporting requirements in EDR and how you go about reporting through EDR. So if we could go to the next slide, and the next one. Okay, hang on 1 second, sorry. Oh, I think we skipped ahead from, so if, okay, all right, well, we'll just start with the default reporting then. So for EDR reporting, we are requiring that that servicers report the code 032 as the reason for default, and that's for the national emergency. And then also, if the borrower is in a forbearance, you're going to also be reporting the default action code 09 for forbearance. So in most cases, when you have a verified hardship for COVID-19 related a hardship where you're going to end up having to report that 032 to tell us about the hardship, because you verified that is the hardship reason, and now the loan becomes delinquent, because we are requiring that you wait for the borrower to miss a payment before reporting the 032. So if that borrower has missed a payment, and also that the hardship reason is COVID-19, at that time, I mean, really, there should almost always, if not always, be a forbearance in place. And so we should usually be seeing both the 032 and the 09. And then we also have here the repayment plan code, which is 12, which is a common transition from a shorter term forbearance option. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Great. Okay, so here we have kind of a screenshot of what it looks like in the actual reporting activity. And so you can see here that the default reason code would be selected as the 032, the National Emergency Declaration, in the center of the screen. And then in the bottom left is where you
Hey, Ryan, are you there? I think we might have lost you. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Baha, it's Ben. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay.
Hey, Ryan.
So, yeah, I don't know where we'll try to ping Ryan, but while we do that, why don't I take the ball? So, I think Ryan was walking through the screen for electronic default reporting, reminding everyone to report code 032 for the National Emergency Declaration, bottom left corner, if you're also reporting that as a forbearance. you would report the 09 forbearance code, and you click that screen at the bottom. So this is a depiction of if you go into to do your EDR, what it's going to look like. So assuming we don't have Ryan back, why don't we go to the next slide? Okay, post forbearance transition. Next slide, please. Okay, I think this is the reporting. This slide is going to show you the reporting of up from the time that the forbearance starts, excuse me, until you're reaching to the post forbearance and going into the transition. So, actually, can you click through it and have some of these things start to show up? So you can see here in this example, if you look all the way to the left, you see that the borrower is current, PITI monthly payment is $1,500. And the reason I want to show this is just showing the full depiction of what it will look like as you report a loan that's on forbearance to us and ultimately going into forced forbearance. So you see here that's in the month of April. The borrower's going to miss their first payment. They confirmed with you that they have a COVID-19 hardship and request forbearance. Hey, Bob, can you click to the next piece? I think it'll show it to us. Perfect. All right. So then now we're in May. Borrower owes $1,500. They're on forbearance. You're going to report to us in the month of May, in the first 3 business days of May, your first EDR for April. So you're going to report code 09 because they're in forbearance. Again, 032 because they're impacted by COVID. With a start date of April 1st, the start date of the forbearance is April 1st, and that is because that is the first payment that's being forborne. So whether you had the conversation on April 15th or whether you even had the conversation on March 15th, the start date is going to be April 1st because that's when the forbearance period actually begins with the period where the borrower misses the payment. And then again, default reason code 032. Next month, the borrower misses their next payment. Again, they're still on forbearance. This is expected. You're going to do your next month's EDR. Again, we're showing here what you're going to report to us is the exact same codes. 09 for forbearance, 032 for default reason, and the start date is still going to continue to be April 1st. So we're going to go through all the way to the end, and now we're in the last month. They are, it's been September. The forbearance period has come to an end. Again, you're working with the borrower. You're working with them on the next options. And what this is showing here at the bottom is the last time, again, assuming that the forbearance is not extended up to a total of 12 months, but that the forbearance is going to end at 6 months in this example, that it gets, and your last time you're reporting EDR as a forbearance is going to be in the first 3 business days of October for the September cycle. Again, reporting 09, 032, April 1st. And what's going to close out the forbearance for us and for your reporting to us is no longer reporting that forbearance code. So starting in November, when you're reporting what took place in October, you're not going to report the 09 forbearance to us, and that's going to let us know that the last day of the forbearance was actually September 30th. And then you're going to start obviously going into whatever the post-forbearance transition is, whatever the option is. There'll be new, potential EDR associated with that as well. If it's a reinstatement, you're going to report code 20 to us, let us know that it's been reinstated. And you won't have to report EDR, again, because the loan's current. If it's a repayment plan, you report code 12 to us, let us know it's on a repayment plan, and you report that every single month until the borrower becomes current. I'm going to skip over payment deferral for a second because there is no code associated with that today. And go to extend modification, cap and extend modification, and flex modification, which anytime you're doing a loan modification with us, there is going to be a trial period plan that starts that mod process. And so you're going to report to us every month that the borrower's on the trial plan with the code BF, that's B as in boy, F as in Frank, the BF code. That's our trial, that's our one trial plan code that we use. So you report that to us. Again, I skipped over payment deferral. Payment deferral does not have a code because it's going to move straight to current once the borrower has made their payments that are required under the payment deferral program. Now, I think many of you out there know that we are working and trying to figure out a way to take that payment deferral program as it exists today and make it more applicable to borrowers impacted by COVID-19. which means, extending it beyond 30 or 60 days of delinquency. It means not having a rolling delinquency because these are borrowers coming off of forbearance. So when that happens, we may have to update EDR as well and create a new code to let us know if there is a transition or a processing month at that point. But that is, today there is no EDR for that. So checking in, and I see that Ryan has yet to make it back, and I apologize, guys. We just had a little bit of technical difficulties. Why don't we go to the next slide?
Hey, Ben.
And I'll go ahead
Before we go to Q&A and the resources, can we just skip to the, Ryan was supposed to do a very quick overview of the bulletins just one more time in case folks wanted to just have a refresher. So can you do that again for us, please?
Sure, no problem. So again, here are the bulletins that are listed here. If you're looking on your screen, Bulletin 2010, 2027, 2024, which are our specific bulletins that we've announced so far related to COVID-19. First and foremost, I would like to point out one thing. I think you guys probably know that we do almost everything in response to COVID-19.
With Fannie Mae, at the direction and Fannie Mae has decided that they are. Hold on,
Hey Ben, sorry to interrupt. I think your audio is breaking in and out.
Sorry, everybody. We seem to be having some technical issues today. Are you able to hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, I really apologize for this, everybody. It is a very stormy day in Northern Virginia. So I'll start back. We do most of the stuff in alignment. Obviously, we have different EDR than Fannie Mae has for their default reporting, but pretty much everything is in alignment. We put out bulletins with all new policy changes, whether they're permanent or temporary, and Fannie Mae has made the decision that they're doing what's called running lender letter, where they have a lender letter that is explicit for or specific to COVID-19. They're updating it each time. So here's the list of the bulletins we had. I bring that up because yesterday Fannie Mae made an update to their servicing lender letter for COVID-19, and you'll know that we didn't have any bulletin. So Fannie Mae yesterday announced that they have changed. If you saw FHFA's press release about a week and a half ago, that Fannie Mae is now matching us on the what we call an activation cycle, meaning that a loan that is delinquent or on whether it's not on forbearance or not, you're required to pass through for Freddie Mac scheduled interest to us every month until the loan hits the 120th day of delinquency, in which case it becomes inactivated and you stop passing through any scheduled amounts. Fannie Mae's policy is different. You would have passed it through the entire length of the forbearance, but now they have matched us, and you're only for them passing through up until day 120. Now for them it's P&I, both principal and interest, but still ending on day 120. They announced that. I don't know why I'm doing a plug for their announcement, but I just want to clear up any potential confusion as to why Freddie Mac didn't have a bulletin yesterday. That's because we didn't change any policy. Fannie Mae is matching us. So our three bulletins that we have put out, again, in front of you, I've already gone through the numbers. Starting from the beginning, we put 2020-4, if I'm going through it all, announced a number of different things, most of which has been overwritten by Bulletin 2020-10, things like the foreclosure moratorium, forbearance, temporary policy, and credit reporting. The one thing that we have put in there that's still standing in 2020-4 is regarding the loan modifications that we have opened up for response to COVID-19, which is our disaster modification, known as the extend modification and the cap and extend modification, or the disaster relief mod, as it's actually officially called. Those are still available. Again, I think I mentioned just a minute ago, we are looking into trying to figure out a way to use our payment deferral as a way to actually replace those two modifications, because the payment deferral actually acts as a natural way to kind of take care of the shortfalls of both of those modification programs, while also getting the borrower back to their normal contractual payment if that's what they want and they don't need payment relief. So our goal will be to figure out a way to use that program, and it's something that we are working on as expeditiously as possible to get out there, but it's not ready yet. Bulletin 2020-7 announced exactly a week later, kind of the call the fast follower items to the borrower relief, and this was more about you guys. Number one, we announced again the Code 032, the EDR requirements for telling us about delinquent loans impacted by COVID-19. We put some temporary relief measures in there regarding property inspections and preservation requirements. This was important to make sure that in the time of social distancing, excuse me, and among other things that stay-at-home orders, you may not be able to get property inspections or preservation activities done, whether that's on delinquent loans or for insurance loss settlements. And we wanted to make sure that if you can't do it, that's fine. Document your systems and move on, and you can still perform the activities you need to, like releasing insurance proceeds. So we can do. So we announced that. And then we also put in there a reminder about QRPC, and that as you're trying to get contact with the borrower, can we go back a page? As we're trying to get back to get with the borrower, that you may obtain QRPC through any means. It doesn't have to be a telephone. It could be your website, your app, whatever the case may be. We're getting a lot of questions. Obviously, you guys have volumes you've never experienced probably before. Some of you are using that technology, and that is perfectly acceptable to Freddie Mac. And then in Bulletin 2020-10, that's the bulletin we most recently put out a few weeks ago now, and that talks to the kind of our response to the CARES Act, among a couple other things. But it updated our forbearance requirements to be for any length of delinquency. Normally our forbearance policy would limit forbearance up to 12 months of delinquency. This does not do that. The CARES Act did not allow for it. It was for any length of delinquency, meaning if a borrower was already more than 12 months delinquent, they can still request forbearance under the CARES Act, therefore under our policy as well, because that is the law. Now, if we hadn't updated our policy again, you'd still have to follow that because it's the law. But obviously, we don't want to have a policy that's out there conflicting with federal guidance. Now, it updated forbearance rules. It updated the credit reporting. So CARES Act has specific requirements in Section 4021 of how you are to report to credit agencies and the accommodations that are being made. So we had to update ours as well. Previously, we required our disaster policy of credit suppression, but the CARES Act has more explicit rules and actually amended the FCRA to get there. So you have to follow that. So our guidance now is just follow the law. And one thing that we tend to get asked this, so I'll be pretty explicit here, which is a loan that is on forbearance is a delinquent loan to us. If you're reporting a loan on forbearance, you're reporting, as we said on the last slide, a delinquent loan with the date started of the date that of the DDLPI or the first payment missed. So that doesn't mean you're going to report that as a delinquent loan to the credit agencies under the CARES Act. In fact, you're probably not. But it does mean that you will have a difference in reporting to the investor versus what you'll have to the credit agencies. If you take a loan that you are giving that credit accommodation and you report it to us as a current loan, that means you're advancing the DDLPI every month. That does mean that you're effectively that means we're going to draft the P&I from you every single month, and it means you're effectively making the payment for the borrower. So I want to be very clear that, if you need to do some work to make sure that you're reporting that accurately and reporting delinquent to us and current to the credit bureaus, I implore you to make sure that you're doing that properly. It can get costly otherwise. Credit reporting forbearance foreclosure moratorium and expanded to the same date, but expanded to all foreclosure activities under the CARES Act. So did ours. Additionally, there are some changes in the CARES Act related to bankruptcy processing. And as a result, between that and just the reality of the situation, we, just like we do with property inspections, making our requirements what I'll call non-mandatory for a period of time, we did the same thing for filing for motions for relief from automatic stay or MFRs on Chapter 13, 11, 12, or 13 borrowers, where normally you would, after the borrower misses their second post-petition payment, you would have to file for motion for relief from stay so that you could obviously process the foreclosure. Given that all that doesn't happen right now, we did put a temporary, policy in place that says you don't have to file, exactly at that time. You do it in a time that makes sense, giving you the flexibility to deal with the realities of the situation and the laws at hand. And then we did update our QRPC requirements to make what we're calling limited QRPC, which means you don't have to check on the occupancy status. And this isn't really for forbearance because under the CARES Act, you need to approve forbearance if the borrower attests to having a COVID-19 hardship. What does the test mean? It's probably less than QRPC. But as you're starting to work with borrowers who are eventually going to come off of forbearance, none of our programs that are going to be available that we just talked about on the prior slide, none of those require different sets of rules for the occupancy status. So we're not asking you to check for that. In order to get the borrower into a solution as quick as possible once they're able to repay their debts. Next slide, please. Okay. I don't see it. So that is the bulletins that we have put out. So far, again, we do continue to look at a number of things. Mentioned earlier, we are trying to figure out a way to use the payment deferral more expansively than what we do today. We do, have some other things on the horizon, notably that the foreclosure and eviction moratorium that is in place in our guidance as well as in the CARES Act expires on May 17th. That's only 18 days away. Nope, 30 days come April. That is 17 days away. And, a decision is going to have to be made at the federal level, whether that's going to be extended or not. So I would suspect that that's something that will be in announcements in the near future. And then, we are continuing to look at different items as you guys continue to let us know the different feedbacks, whether they be, state rules or laws that are being passed or, a lot of the feedback we're getting on these calls or getting through our, our 1-800 Freddie or stuff like that. We're taking all of that and we're trying to, to aggregate this information, again, alongside with Fannie Mae under FHFA's direction to figure out what, what other temporary policy changes we need to make for COVID-19. And then, of course, we are about to be in May, which means we are not that far away from June, which is the official start of hurricane and tornado season. So we need to keep that in mind as well. The topic du jour of the last few years in our industry has been disasters, and I don't think that COVID-19 is going to stop that from happening. So that's something that we have to keep in mind as well as we keep working forward. So this page right here, actually, just now that we see it, it's just reflecting what I just talked about before, so I don't need to repeat it. So at this point, I think two things. I think number one, we do have Ryan McGinnis back online, and number two, I think Sujatha, we are going to Q&A. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, great. And Ryan, you are back online?
Yes, and if you can hear me, and I hope you can this time, I want everyone to know I really nailed that EDR info, but just, I was the only audience.
You said it well? Great.
Sorry about that. Computer meltdown.
We've had, it's been, if you are in the, Washington, D.C. region, right now, you know that it has been a hectic weather day here, and it's causing some technical difficulties. So, all right, Sujatha, Q&A.
All right, guys, can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Brilliant. So we've had a couple of questions raised on this from our last call, so I'd like to follow up on it. And this is we've actually a couple of people asked the similar question. Do servicers continue to send monthly billing statements and or late notices to borrowers during the forbearance period?
Hey, Sujatha, so you do not have to send late notices, but you do still have to send the periodic statements.
Okay. Good to know. Next question. So there's been a little bit, I think we got this question last week as well, and I think some other folks need to hear it. There's some confusion around what to report to us and what to report to the credit agencies. So there was a question directly that came saying, how are we supposed to report a delinquency to Freddie Mac and then report current to the CBRs? Can we touch a little bit just about overall the reporting piece as far as how that is separated now?
Sure. So go ahead, Ben.
Did you miss that, Ryan? I actually just touched on this just a couple minutes ago. So I'll just repeat that again, which is when a borrower is on forbearance with us and they are progressing through the forbearance, they are missing their payments, they are a delinquent loan. Under the CARES Act, you likely have to report them as current. So therefore, that means you will be reporting them two different ways. One to your investor of what the actual status of the loan is, and one under the CARES based on the accommodation required by the federal law. We know that they're probably not going to match up. Unfortunately, the credit reporting is completely out of our wheelhouse and nothing that we have any control over whatsoever. But, again, if you are looking to say, well, I'd rather just report it as current to the credit agencies and then the loan as current to Freddie Mac, reporting it current to us means you are advancing the DDLPI every month. Advancing the DDLPI every month means that we are going to draft the full P&I payment from you, from your custodial account every month, and you are effectively making that payment for the borrower. That's not something that's going to be reimbursed down the road. It's the actual payment because the DDLPI is advanced. So, it's very important to make sure that you are able to do those things separately because, otherwise it could be costly.
Thank you for that, Ben. Sorry. I actually have a question for Shuba this time. One of our clients was wondering, we understand bulk upload is not available to process post-forbearance COVID borrowers. And if we need to determine the terms for the extend and the cap, we have to submit our recommendations via the other modification in WP. Is there any changes being planned for WP that will allow for real-time decisioning for a loan for extend or cap and extend?
Can you hear me? Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
The extend mod is going to be on WP starting July, so that would be on there. We did not receive a lot of cap and extend, therefore we chose not to put it on WP, and that would, if you need to do that, that would still need to come on other paths. Sujata, did I answer the question?
So the question was around it'll become real time, right? So it'll be
Yes.
able to set, perfect. Excellent, yes. Thank you. This is related a little bit to our hierarchy, Ben and Ryan. Can a servicer decide going into the forbearance process whether or not they will go with an extend or defer option, or does this decision need to be made as the forbearance period is ending and reinstatement repayment is not an option at that time?
Yeah, so the way that we view forbearance is that you should go into the forbearance knowing that that the borrower is unable to make the payments or unable to make the full payments, and that it's a temporary hardship. But you really shouldn't start planning for the end of the forbearance until you get there, because A, you don't know how long it's going to last, and B, you don't know, whether, when I say how long it's going to last, you might know how long the initial period lasts, but you're not sure yet how long the hardship is going to persist for, and then you also don't know what the circumstances are going to be at the end. So you can certainly inform borrowers about all the different options that might be available to them as they as the forbearance comes to an end, even going into the forbearance or even before you start a forbearance. You can let borrowers know about those options, but you shouldn't be making a final determination on the transition from a forbearance until you get there. And then at that time, work with the borrower based on their circumstances at that time, and then you can determine what the best option is for that borrower by going through our hierarchy.
Thank you. The next question is around prop inspections. If we had a property that was delinquent prior to COVID and has not requested assistance, do we put inspections on hold as well?
So yeah, it's up to you whether you can complete the property inspections, but we're giving you the flexibility to not have to do those, just given the dangers that could exist. And of course, those dangers could exist whether the borrower is delinquent or not, and that's kind of the point of the flexibilities we're giving is to not put you in a bad position or the borrower or whoever's completing the inspection.
Or violating the stay-at-home orders. One thing that I'll add to that, Ryan, is we've gotten, I think we just mentioned, a little bit ago that the feedback that we get on these calls and other contact methods is invaluable. And one question that we have gotten as well, and one point of clarification we've been asked to do, and I know Fannie Mae has as well, is around property inspection, specifically borrowers, whether they were delinquent before or even they weren't, but are now delinquent and on forbearance. So the question is, okay, the borrower's on forbearance. Technically, GSEs, your guides, would not require us to not do an inspection. That decision of whether to do it is still in our hands. But is that your intent? And the answer is no. If a borrower's on forbearance, even if they were delinquent before this pandemic occurred and the national emergency declaration was made, even if they were delinquent beforehand, if you have that borrower on a forbearance, you should not be doing any property inspections during that forbearance period. And so we will look in a future announcement to make that perfectly clear as well, that you should not be doing inspections on a borrower in forbearance, regardless of whether they were delinquent before or after the emergency declaration.
Thank you, Ben and Ryan and Shuba. Baha, you can open it up for open line.
Great. So if you do have any questions, go ahead and select the raise hand icon on the right side of your screen, and we will unmute your phone line. All right. First question comes from Elva. Elva, your line is now open.
Thank you. So I do have two questions. My first question is, if a borrower was currently on a modification earlier last month and they were just modified, are they still going to qualify if they're not able to do a repayment plan? Would they still qualify for another loan modification solution? And will we? And then my second question is, will we get more information on the deferment as we get closer to July?
So yeah, I can take those questions. So the first question, our requirements for things like the extend mod and the cap and extend mod, and then also kind of the special requirements for a flex mod, would be that the borrower was current as of the national emergency declaration date. So I guess it would depend on what the specific mod effective date was. So if it was 4/1 and they were more than one payment then delinquent as of 3/1, then you'd have to ask for an exception. But if the mod effective date or the first payment due under the modification was 3/1, then then technically they were current as of that date. So you would be delegated to make that decision. And we don't have any restrictions on recently completed mods for forbearance plans. So under the scenario where the mod finished, the mod went through and the first payment was due on 3/1, and that borrower is now current but couldn't make the payment because of a COVID-19 related hardship, you could put that borrower on a forbearance. That forbearance might extend to beyond 90 days delinquent, and then if that were the case, that borrower would be eligible to be evaluated for all options, but would not be restricted from extend mod, cap and extend mod, or the flex mod, because we waive the requirements about the gating requirements for like a recently completed mod that did not succeed.
Okay.
And in terms of the deferral, would you mind clarifying a little bit more what you're looking for with the more information?
As far as requirements, what are going to be the requirements in if we have to submit a borrower
Got it.
for review for deferment for the additional options?
Right. So for the payment deferral, we put out the guidance recently, of course, and that guidance isn't really applicable to a borrower coming out of a forbearance. We are working on potentially updating the program, and I apologize, I did miss whatever Ben said. I don't know if he touched on this, but potentially updating the program, or not updating, but having a COVID-19 version that would be more applicable to a borrower coming out of forbearance. And as we see it, and if this does come to fruition, it would be a no-doc program that would mirror very closely the eligibility requirements for the extend mod and the cap and extend mod.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Next question comes from Kim. Kim, your line is open.
Hello. I had a question about the calculation of delinquent interest. The Workout Prospector Guide says that you may not calculate delinquent interest using a declining balance method, but the CARES Act says that we cannot charge interest over what would have been paid with the normal payments.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think depending on your interpretation of the CARES Act, you should always defer to the law. Our policy always defers to law. So to the extent we haven't addressed that yet, it is something that we're talking about internally on how and if we need to address that specifically. But otherwise, you would always follow the law over our requirements.
So we won't have an issue with mod settlement then if we follow the law.
So as I said, we're working through that now, but I mean we cannot require you to break the law. So we would have to figure that out if there were to be an issue with that on our end.
Okay.
Great. Next question comes from Susan Farrell. Susan, your line is open.
Hi, I do the EDR reporting. And we have a small group of members that are currently delinquent and are in forbearance that I will be reporting most likely tomorrow. But we have a few that we've set up sub-accounts for these people, and they have elected to pay their escrow or their interest in their escrow, and they've been able to make their payment right along, thinking they were going to be delinquent, but they've been keeping up. Are they actually in any type of reportable forbearance?
So I want to make sure. Okay, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I was going to say, probably asked the same exact question you were, which is, you said they set up a sub account for their escrow, and you said they're funding that account. Did they also make their P&I payment?
Yes.
Then you would not report EDR to us. The bonus not delinquent, you would not report it to us.
So they are technically not part of a forbearance until they miss a payment.
Right. You've approved them, but the payment has not been forborne yet. So you would not report them to us in default reporting because the loan has not gone delinquent.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Next question comes from Paul. Hey, Paul, your line's open.
Hi, I've got a question. If an account becomes current mid-month, they reinstate, say, prior to the end of the forbearance period, are we going to have to report it as any sort of special code the following month in our typical update?
So you're saying the borrower's in forbearance, they get to, let's call it June, in the middle of the month, before their forbearance ends at the end of June, reinstate their account. When it comes to the first 3 business days of July, you're going to report June's activity, in which case you'll report the Code 20 reinstatement, and after that, assuming the borrower makes their payments, you would stop EDR at that point.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Next question comes from Susan. Susan, your line is open.
Hi, I have a really quick question. It's about, I have a specific borrower that has called in and let me know that he is impacted by COVID-19. However, he does not want to agree to a forbearance. When I'm reporting that, am I just reporting 032 and not the forbearance, 09?
So
Yes.
when you say impacted by, sorry, Ryan, we're uncoordinated here. When you say impacted but doesn't want the forbearance, is that because they plan to continue to make their payments, or they just are going to go into a delinquency without a forbearance?
I don't even know. They haven't called me back. I've emailed them a couple times. As of right now, they're still delinquent. We've made the offer. We've talked about it. I haven't gotten anything back, so I'm anticipating that as of tomorrow, I'll be reporting him. I know that they have been impacted simply by job loss, so I'm just unsure as how I approach that.
So I think unless Ryan corrects me, you're going to report that, you can report that as 032 as the reason for default code and nothing else.
Nothing else. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Now, I hope your borrower does call back and realizes that if you're going to be delinquent anyways, why would you not take the forbearance? It's going to save your credit. It's going to eliminate your late charges, no additional interest, all of the things. That's the whole purpose of the forbearance. So I do hope they call you back and realize that it is beneficial if you're not going to make your payments to take the forbearance.
Yeah, I'm really kind of hoping. I emailed him a couple times in the last couple days, and we'll see.
All right, good luck.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Again, if you do have any questions, go ahead and select the raise hand icon on the right side of your screen, and we will unmute your phone line. All right, looks like we have another question from Susan Farrell. Susan, your line's open.
Yeah, just another question about the sub-account. If our member continues to put funds in the sub-account, I understood that once we had enough to make a full payment, we should make that payment for them. Is that correct?
Your escrow account? Can you
I'm sorry,
or suspense account?
Yeah, it's just like a suspense account, and they put money, their extra money that they have in there. And are we to are we to take money from there once we accumulate enough for a full payment, go ahead and make that payment?
So in terms of just our kind of application of payment, the proceeds to make a payment, what we would generally say, and what's usually described in the note as well, is that you would take those funds and put them in a suspense account, which sounds like is what you're saying, and then once you have enough to apply it to a full payment, you do that, and then you advance the due date of last paid installment, and move it forward another month. So it sounds like it sounds like you're interpreting that correctly, if I'm interpreting the question correctly.
So say they don't have any money in a particular month and they don't have enough to make their payment and they run a month late, then the forbearance starts. What if they accumulate enough funds to bring themselves current again? Then we just don't report it the following month as a forbearance?
Right, yep. And then if they were to start it, go ahead, Ben.
I was saying just make sure you report the reinstatement to us, and that way it'll bring as you bring the DDLPI up. Yep.
Okay, got it.
Great, thank you. Just got a little note from one of the attendees. I thought that the code 20 for reimbursement on EDR is no longer in use unless the borrower is in foreclosure status.
Well, that may be correct. I think it's not required to be reported to us unless the loan is in the status. I think if you, I think when we made the changes, guys, and I apologize, this just happened a number of months ago with our investor reporting changes. I do think if you make I think if you are reporting in our loan level reporting, you know, the reporting you do for all loans every month, you report the loan as current there with the current DDLPI, and you don't report EDR, I think that works unless the loan was previously in foreclosure, in which case you'd have to report the code 20 as well. I believe that is the case. That being said, I think if you still reported the code 20, because that's what you've always done for those loans, that it would not be a problem either. Unfortunately, our reporting guru, John Felix, who runs our investor reporting, could not make it today. So we can check with him and validate that and confirm whether I'm wrong or not. I probably am.
Thank you, Ben. Another question
you pointed
that came
out,
in.
I'm probably wrong. Thank you.
Another question that came in: Will a trial period payments be required for the cap and extend or extend modification?
Yes, we do require a trial period plan for both of those options.
Great. All right. Looks like we have a few other live questions with audio. Paige, your line is open.
Hi. So I have a question in regards to reporting to the credit bureau. So we do report them. Do we report them in good standing on, I guess, to the credit bureau itself, not to you guys, since...
So yeah, I mean, our guidance on that is to follow the CARES Act, and you know, we are that's our official guidance. We try not to overly interpret law.
Right.
At a broad level, I will tell you, if you look at the CARES Act, I think it is pretty clear that if the borrower was current going into a forbearance, you would report them as current. So I will say that, but I don't want to get into any more detail than that, if you don't mind.
That's fine.
Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to just have clarification on that.
Great. Thank you. Next question comes from Michelle. Michelle, your line is open.
Thank you. If a borrower does choose to use the extend or the cap and extend mod, do we keep their interest rate the same, or are we using the Freddie Mac modification interest rate?
It's a really good question. So on a fixed rate mortgage for both of those, it would remain the same. For ARMs and step rate mortgages, you convert to a fixed rate, so you sometimes will have to change the rate. And what you do in those cases is you would look at what the interest rate cap is on the mortgage. So for example, let's say it's a step rate, and at some point the rate went all the way down to 2 under HAMP, and it's in the middle of its steps, and right now it's at 4%. But it actually let's say, for the sake of the example, right now it's at 3%. But it's going to continue to step for the next couple of years, and it has a cap of 5%. So you'd look at that 5% rate, that is the cap, and you'd compare it to our flex mod rate, which, you know, right now I think is right around 3.5, and you'd choose the lower option. So in that case, you'd be comparing the 3.5 to the 5, and you'd choose the 3.5, and it works the same way for ARMs. But on a fixed rate mortgage, you'd always leave the rate exactly the same as it was.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next question comes from Tim. Tim, your line is open. Hey, Tim.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. My office is in Illinois, but less than a mile away is Iowa. Illinois is on the lockdown side. Iowa's on the open side. For the month of May, is there a policy on field chases?
On what? I'm sorry? I didn't hear you.
Could you hear
is there
any
a policy
of that?
on? No, I heard the question. I'm sorry. Did you say field chase?
Yes.
I don't know
where
what that
you go
means.
Contacting people door to door.
Oh. So remember, we're not HUD. We don't require you to do that to begin with.
Okay.
So
okay.
we don't have any requirements. Follow your own company guidance for that. Similar to what we just said with property inspections, where, you know, a borrower gets delinquent, you'd have somebody go inspect the property, which is kind of the same thing, going door to door. We are temporarily saying, doesn't matter where you are in the country, you're going to make that decision. You don't have to do it, because we know that there are different rules everywhere.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Next question comes from Shirley. Shirley, your line is open.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. So we were just looking for clarification on the statement, a loan in forbearance is a delinquent loan. If you have agreed to forbear, then why are they delinquent?
So, so what we're agreeing to, or what the agreement is with the borrower, is that they aren't going to be expected to be making. Let's just assume it's a full suspension of the monthly payment. That we understand that they're not going to be making their monthly payment, but it is still due under the note. And so while we won't, even if there wasn't a foreclosure moratorium or anything like that, we would not be proceeding with any foreclosure action or anything like that. And so it's in place to give the borrower that, assurance that we understand that they're not going to make the payment due to having a legitimate hardship reason, and that they can take that time without having to worry about any foreclosure actions commencing or anything along those lines, and then work with that borrower to try to reinstate via all of our available options. But nevertheless, they still are missing the payments with each month.
Great. Thank you. Next question comes from Shannon. Shannon, your line is open.
Just requested a forbearance plan and due to the COVID, and they were already delinquent. They're due for their March payment, and the customer accepted the forbearance plan. However, they're going to continue making their escrow payments. And today we received a check from them to satisfy their escrow payment that was due in March. However, they decided to also give us some extra funds. Those extra funds, we should probably put into a suspense account. But then if they make another payment, can we apply that towards the next escrow payment to satisfy April escrow, or does the extra funds have to be applied toward the March P&I payment?
So, first off, I just want to say I think, for us at Freddie Mac and all of you, we appreciate how, I don't know if appreciate's our word, but we fully recognize how murky all of these different situations are at this time. And boy, I think you have one of the murkiest ones I've heard. So I'm going to try to walk through it and see if we come up with a logical answer to it. But in this scenario, you have a borrower who is delinquent. They're not going to be able to make their mortgage payment. They still want to fund their escrow account because they want to pay their taxes and insurance. Good for them. They're making the payments to you. They're funding them as they are supposed to do every single month. They have sent you additional monies. I would say this. Number one, I would work with your legal counsel to make sure that you're doing what's in your procedures as well. My 2 cents is this. I think if you put it into the suspense account to ultimately be applied to their P&I, that's probably within the terms of the note and mortgage. I say that full well knowing that I am not an attorney and I'm not your attorney. I think that's fine. But I would say that my personal recommendation, not a requirement of Freddie Mac, my personal recommendation is that you contact that borrower and ask them what their intent for that money is. The same way you would if a borrower was current and sent you additional funds without specifying whether it was to advance their escrow or whether it was to pay down their as a principal curtailment. You'd call and you'd ask them to put into suspense until you verified what those funds were for. I would treat it the same way here and call the borrower and ask them explicitly, what did you intend this to be for? I think otherwise you could get yourself in a little bit of trouble and for what purpose? So I think if you did put it into suspense, I think you're probably fine. I think you should call the borrower and ask them where they intended that money to go.
Okay, thank you.
And check with your lawyer, because again, I'm not a lawyer.
Great. All right, so just taking a look at the time, it looks like we're out of time, so I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Don for closing remarks. Don?
Thanks, Baha. And thanks, everyone, for joining us today for this information session. Good engagement. Be on the lookout, hopefully, for a bulletin next week. You heard it from Ben and Ryan. We're anxious to get that out. We got our fingers crossed. And we're also anticipating another servicer information session as well. So with that, we'll end the call. Have a great day.